Hey, this is your buddy, Jack Kelly, with the Blind Ambition podcast. And today we have an emergency podcast about what's going on with Amazon. And what we're going to do, because Rick is an expert on Amazon, expert on tech. So he's going to kind of give the insights to what the heck is going on with the return to office, what's going to happen to Amazon managers, what are the kind of ripple effects that we could share later. But let's get it started. Rick, can you tell a little bit to the audience what's happening now with Amazon?
Yeah, and I would say an emergency podcast for an emergency situation is right on the money. So, folks on Blind, they are freaking out about this memo. And really, it's for three reasons. The first is, Andy Jassy yesterday on Monday sent out an employee wide memo, and it's titled Strengthening Our Culture and Teams. And some notable tidbits: he wants to have fewer meetings, right? He explicitly says pre-meetings for the pre-meetings for the decision meetings, right? Like he is sick of the bureaucracy. He even wants to create a bureaucracy mailbox to root out unnecessary process or bureaucracy. So he's actually inviting folks to kind of snitch on their managers, snitch on the process that they think aren't working, so he can cut it out and root it out. He wants to reorganize the company to cut management layers. He wants to increase the number of direct reports to each managers by 15%. And obviously, kind of the headline thing that a lot of folks are concerned about, maybe this is the death of remote work because starting January 2025, Amazon is going to go to 5 days a week in the office, no remote work with assigned desk seating. And that's currently up from the 3 times a week right now. So, Jack, does this sound like an emergency to you based on what I said, or is this an
Yeah.
overreaction?
No, I think this could be a big game changer. We've been for the last few years since the pandemic, going back and forth with remote, go to the office, hybrid, dancing around it. And to me, it almost seems like they're putting a stake in the ground right now and saying, hey, we're going to do back to the office, no effing around anymore. Get your asses back in the seats. And that's it. No more bullshit. Get in the office, do your work, and it's a game changer. It's going to really, because I think since Amazon is such a well regarded entity, it's very easy to then see other companies going along and saying, well, we weren't, a lot of the executives were saying, hey, we do want people back in the office, but now that Amazon is doing it, gives them an excuse to say, hey, look, Amazon is doing it. So now Meta is going to do it, and Google and what have you. And you're going to see this ripple effect of others, most likely going back to the office. And I'm sorry to
Jack,
say that. I don't want to take any glee, just, for the audience. Like, I'm just trying to analyze the situation. And I'm not saying this is what it should be, but unfortunately, this seems to be the case.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. So, just going a bit deeper in terms of the scale
Mhm.
and the kind of impact that this decision is going to kind of ripple out from, or could ripple out from, Amazon has more than 1.5 million employees worldwide. 1.5 million.
Crazy. And wait, can I
And
interject? There's about 150,000 to 200,000 managers. So as you mentioned before, they're going to do individual contributors with managers. Dude, this could be a bloodbath for managers, right? 120 to 200,000 or more managers are out there.
right. And
Whoa.
so I think a lot of those folks are going to be pretty safe, right? Because
Yeah.
if you look at 1.5 million kind of global workforce, about 350,000 are your kind of corporate white collar employees, right? So 80% of the company, they've been working 5 days a week in the
Mhm.
warehouses, out in the field, delivering packages, what have you, right? That's 1.1, 1.2 million employees that work in the warehouses that work in operations. So that white collar workforce of 300, 350,000, the folks, that are on blind, I would have to imagine that the number of managers there is a bit less.
So that's really
Smaller
interesting.
cohort.
So that's really interesting. So what you're saying is that a lot of the managers are white collar, professionals. They're in the warehouses and such. So do you think they're going to lose their jobs, or no? They're really talking about white collar people.
I think the big focus really is the white collar folks, right?
Mm,
Like the folks that are in HQ1 in Washington State, right? The Puget Sound, and then HQ2 in Alexandria, Virginia, right? Like it's really, I imagine, the focus area for the company is going to be those locations. And I'd have to say it makes sense, right? Because those are also the white collar folks.
mhm.
They're making a lot more money. Can we afford to have tens of thousands of, white collar professionals that are earning 300, 400, 500, 600K in total comp a year? I mean, I think that's the part that folks are also discounting. There are some cost savings involved. The CEO wants to signal to shareholders, hey, we're a 30-year-old company, but I am getting serious about cutting costs and driving efficiency.
Now, what happens to those managers? So let's say just a small fraction. Let's be positive. It's not going to be a lot of people. Let's say a small percentage of white collar professional managers are let go. Is there a marketplace for them to find other jobs now, or is it going to be really hard?
Yeah, I mean, my guess is it's going to be fairly easy for a lot of these
Oh,
folks
yeah.
to go to another tech company.
Well, that's good. Okay. Now, why
Yeah.
is that? Because like it does seem that, from the outside perspective, like tech, hiring is okay, not great, but there's enough opportunities out there for these managers.
Generally, yes, right?
Yeah.
Because I would say that a lot of folks already, Amazon is such a huge workforce, and folks are churning in and out,
Mhm.
voluntarily, getting asked to leave, whatever, um, quite regularly. And you think about those LinkedIn profiles, the folks on Blind, where they have ex Amazon in their headline, ex Amazon in their title, and they're off at other startups, other companies fairly
Mm.
easy, fairly quickly, right? Because folks want that high level of management experience, that operations experience, that huge impact and working at scale. For a lot of these companies, they would, die to have someone of that caliber come.
That makes sense. So what you're saying is that, okay, if you're kind of this manager, good manager at Amazon, and unfortunately, let's say you're picked to, lose your job, there's going to be so many other people say, hey, if this guy worked at, Amazon, let's make 10 years, 5 years, whatever, 20 years. And they're like, wow, I want this person for my company because they know everything. They probably learned so much that they could offer to our company. So it sounds like there's going to be opportunities available, fortunately, right?
My guess is yes, but
Okay.
alternatively, these are also folks that they have a bunch of experience. Why not start their own startup,
Mm,
right? That is a possible kind of exit ramp for a lot of these folks that, could be a bit gentle, right? If you think about, we've talked about this in previous episodes, how tech compensation is structured, this stock-based compensation,
mhm.
especially at Amazon, where it's backloaded. You get more of your stock the longer you stay. It's not evenly distributed over your tenure, over the grant. I mean, these are folks that are kind of locked in because they want to see that huge Amazon stock hit their Fidelity account, hit their E-Trade account. And so now these folks might be freed up to say, actually, you know what? I'm not going to go work for someone else. I'm going to start
Hmm.
my own business. And maybe we could kind of see this new flourishing tech environment.
We just want to understand it. So let's say I'm a manager and I get the pink slip, but I have a lot of stock, RSUs, what have you. Because I'm laid off, does that immediately accrue that I can take it and walk away and then do that startup that you're talking about?
No, generally
No,
not,
no.
right?
Okay.
So if you think a lot about how these pay structures are set up,
Mhm.
the stock grant in your offer letter at Amazon vests over 4 years, right? So if you haven't been at that company for 4 years, you're not getting that entirety. But all the stock that you've been getting up, as long as you probably hit that 1 year cliff, as long as you've been at the company for 1 year, that's yours to keep.
So you get something. And I imagine they give generous severance packages too. I'd imagine. No.
Perhaps. I mean, I'm not sure. I think
Yeah.
we have never seen anything like this in terms of hitting these more highly compensated
Mhm.
folks, right? If there are layoffs, they're primarily going to be hitting these managers that have huge grants.
You also think, Rick, that this is a way to force attrition. So now that they hear you have to go back to the office 5 days a week, you're hearing managers getting laid off. Then if you're kind of on the, you know, you know, on the fence, not sure what do I do, you might just say, I'm going to peace out and find something else. Too much stress. Do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, I think you're very smart for noticing that because, there are folks that are saying, oh, these are quote unquote gentlemen's layoffs. You've heard that
Mm,
term before, where these are hidden rifts, right? These are reductions
mhm.
in force where they don't have necessarily the bad publicity of saying, I'm going to lay off 100,000 people. I'm going to lay off 40,000. I'm going to lay off 10,000 people, where they're actually hoping that some folks are just going to exit on their own, saving them severance, saving them the stock payment, and saving them the quote unquote PR trouble.
Is that common? Because I noticed lately I'm blind. The Meta and other people working at other tech companies were saying, "Hey, I'm getting called in for PIPs," and it feeling like there is this under the radar kind of layoffs where they're not announcing it in the press, but people are being pushed out. Is that a thing too?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to compare this to something, it would probably be Meta. So I don't know if folks remember, but Mark Zuckerberg, founder and CEO of Meta, in 2023, he sent out this widely publicized, widely shared employee
Mm-hmm.
memo that basically says something to the effect of 2023 is going to be the year of efficiency. We're going to focus on
Mm-hmm.
streamlining operations, improving productivity. And it was very similar to what's happening right now at Amazon, right? So there was a reorganization, there was a bit of a hiring freeze. He really wanted to look at the management layer and flatten the organization structure, right? So he didn't want managers to manage managers to manage managers. He wanted folks to actually be out there doing the work, being more tech focused rather than simply being a more operations and process focused. He canceled lower priority
Mm-hmm.
projects. But one of the things that he did or he implemented was he wanted to make the performance review cycle a bit more strict. So there were reports from Meta employees on Blind saying, you know what, I'm a manager. Traditionally, we had to rank, let's say, 10% of folks in the needs improvement tier. And now I'm being asked to recalibrate my results and rank folks that maybe it's 12.5% or 13% or 15% of folks across my team, across the company that are now fitting into that bottom category. And, for a lot of these folks at tech companies, they know if you're in that second to bottom or bottom category, that likely means you're probably not going to get
Mm-hmm.
extra stock, you're probably not going to get a raise, right? And these are all like little hints trying to get you to think about leaving, right? You're looking at your peers and you're seeing them get new stock grants, getting raises, and you're not. Like that's going to be
Mm-hmm.
frustrating. Or alternatively, if you keep getting hit and stuck in this lower ranks, obviously you're going to get that performance improvement plan and that formal exit, which is scary, I think.
So we really have second order waves from this. So you start from like five, going back to the office 5 days a week to, you know, fewer managers, and you could just see the chipping away, and each one, like you're peeling this onion, and there are more and more where you say, huh, this is more than, that memo really put out. When you look at it more deeply, it has ramifications throughout this whole industry.
Right. And Amazon has taken particular pride in terms of having a pretty robust performance review cycle, right? When you think about 1.5 million employees, that is a hard task in terms of just getting through that
Hmm.
process, right? Where you can imagine a manager probably has dozens of members on their team already. So just doing those kind of feedback sessions, that takes up a lot of time, right? And so it is a big endeavor. And I mean, to your point, right? They're chipping away. And I think that's Andy Jassy's strategy here, where, you know, we're gonna assume that folks are gonna like leave because of the remote work. They might have
Hmm.
been in a remote role right now and they can't move to Washington State, or they can't move to Alexandria in the Washington DC area. And so they're stuck out that way. There are other folks that are just absolutely not going to come back to the office 5 days a week, even if they do live in the area. So that's another group of folks. And then you have the managers that are going to have to have more direct reports. Maybe they just don't want that. So that's another group that might leave. There's another group that might feel uncomfortable having to rank more of their folks in these lower positions as the performance review gets a bit more tightened, as the standards get a little bit more strict or harder to achieve. Those folks are going to get out. And obviously, the folks that are rated lower than they might have previously, they might want to leave as well.
Could there be some other unintended consequences? For instance, as you just mentioning, so let's say you have the certain managers, now that you're taking them out of the equation, and you can have more individual contributors. Now, a lot of people that say, "Oh, these managers suck anyway." You know how people, like, if you have a manager, of course you're you're beating up on your manager. Oh, they're terrible. But let's say they're not terrible, and you remove them, and now you have just individual contributors. Could that actually be not so good, because they're not sure what to do? Where do I go? I was depending, even though I didn't like my manager, I was depending on my manager to figure this out, or be the buffer between myself and this executive level. Could that also be a problem, where now, like, the people who are working are just maybe not going to be as good because they, they don't have anyone like watching over them?
I think that's not unique to Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Where a lot of these companies, especially these startups that
Mm.
were running fairly lean already, right? If you think about a
Yeah.
startup, they're generally smaller. They generally have flatter
Yeah.
organizations already, right? Because they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the resources to have layers of management. And so when we had all these layoffs of startups as well in 2022, 2023, there was a lot of institutional or domain knowledge. And I imagine at a place like Amazon, where a lot of it is that politics of understanding how things are done, right? The way that Andy Jesse's message, his memo made it sound like there's a lot of weird bureaucracy or layers of tape going on, right? Pre meetings, before decision meetings, right? There is a certain personality or experience that it seems like thrives at Amazon. And if you have some of those folks out, even if he has that bureaucracy tip line,
Mm.
he can't fix those problems fast enough. Like, these things already naturally exist. I imagine it's going to be harder to get some things done for some folks, right? They're going to hit the roadblock where previously that person that knew how to talk to this one person, or that knew how to, write the memo in a certain way that Andy will like it. If those folks are exited, or if those folks leave, if those folks are asked to leave, that could be challenging.
What about this too, Rick? Because this happens all the time. The worker loses their job. Meanwhile, the senior people keep their job, but those are the same people that could have done something. Like, so where was Andy a month ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Like all of a sudden he wakes up and goes, okay, now we're gonna have to. And in the I would have to give him more respect in the letter that he would say we're going to lay off managers instead of dancing around it and pretending. Anyone who could do some math and they realize individual contributors, managers, they realize there's going to be a lot let go. Be a man and just say this is what we're doing. He's not doing it. So clearly it was more of a senior manager issue, not the workers. It's the senior managers where someone should have come and said, wait a minute, we have too much bureaucracy. Let's start like 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, figuring it out, not just wait till the last minute and then just like boom, boom, we're just going to get rid of you guys. Right? It seems
I mean,
cold and callous.
my cynical reading, I'm gonna
Yeah.
maybe take what you said to the next
Even
level.
more. Right.
I think this language is very specific, right? So you're
Mm,
giving yourself the optionality to make greater changes, right? It's almost like this memo. What was really interesting is it's an employee memo, but the company decided to publish it on their blog and their company blog, and all of these reporters covered it yesterday morning. They were quoting from the blog, and so they knew where to look. And
mm,
so my guess as a PR person is the company knew that it was either going to leak or they wanted to leak it themselves. So they published it on their blog and then they pointed reporters directly to that blog. So if you look at all this news
mm,
coverage, there's a lot of links to this blog, there's a lot of direct quotes, and the stories, they all came out yesterday morning, right? All within the hour. And so it wasn't like one publication got the memo first and then they had the scoop and all the other publications were following and saying, oh, according to the Wall Street Journal, or according to Bloomberg, the memo that they had, no, they were linking directly to the piece. And so my theory is the management and Amazon wanted this to go out. They wanted it to be very general and vague because right now it's the middle of September. It's about to be the end of Q3. Q4 is coming up, right? There's out there trying to say, hey, let's actually try to boost the share price and say, hey, investors, shareholders that are out there, we are fighting for you, right? We're going to reduce bureaucracy. Don't count Amazon out. We are going to really like shape up, reorganize the team. We're going to like make the managers work even harder and we're going to ink out even more profits. Like these are all just signals, I think.
wait a minute, because like you're like 100 steps ahead of me here. I'm trying to catch up. So what you're saying, I think, in part, is that the they purposely wanted this to be leaked out because people aren't doing what you and I are doing and really dissecting it and diving into it. Because a lot of reporters, they're just going to say copy and paste and just follow it and not really go into what we're talking about and just regurgitate what they are instead of really going into the weeds like we're doing and talking about like what are the ramifications, layoffs. Because like I didn't see any reporting really talking about laying off managers and what's going to happen and everything we're talking about here. But that's going on. So you're saying that's kind of purposeful. They're doing that to have some cover. Is that how the PR spin works?
Yeah, let me give you some inside
Yeah,
baseball because my
yeah,
day job is as the PR person.
yeah.
So generally, as a company, you would not want to publish your internal communications like
Mm,
a CEO memo, certainly not to all employees. And the only reason why you would kind of publish it yourself is one, you expect your employees to leak it, right? It's where you're just going to
mm,
beat them to the punch
yeah.
and say, actually, there's nothing to leak. I'm going to publish it myself, or I'm going to share it myself. And so you see CEOs post memos on Twitter. You see CEOs post memos on their blog or on the website. And so that's just a way to blunt the effect of a potential leak. Or alternatively, the audience is not only the employees, and the audience might also include shareholders or
Mm,
peers or whatever. And so then you're going to take the added step of publishing it on your blog, publishing on your executives' social media so that you can actually reach that larger audience. And you're actually talking directly to these folks when you're going direct, right? And then when all these reporters are reaching out, I think likely what happened is their PR team probably gave notice to one or two trusted reporters and said, hey, on Monday, we are going to, Andy Jassy is going to release this memo addressing all of our employees. We're going to strengthen our team. We're going to strengthen our management structure. Here's the memo under embargo.
Mm.
And so, giving something to a reporter under embargo means I'm going to share with you the results or the document or whatever it is, the news, before a certain predetermined scheduling time so that the reporter can then have access to that document. They can then write a thorough research story. They can obviously quote from that material. And then once that embargo date hits, all their stories go live at the same time. And so looking at this memo, the title is literally strengthening our culture and teams. Like that is just
So
corporate
vague,
jargon.
right? It means nothing.
Right.
It really just means nothing. It doesn't say
This is not,
managers are going to be, cut and destroyed.
no,
It doesn't. That's
it,
not the title.
it means nothing. And so I read this as a
Yeah.
PR person and I think, wow, like this is a group of PR folks and some lawyers
Mm.
that are going in looking at every single word in terms of how reporters can tear it apart, how customers can tear it apart, how partners and vendors can tear it apart. The cynical people that
Mm.
just hate Amazon, how they're going to tear it apart, and just writing it. And it's this writing by committee, this like safety behind corporate jargon, this like general vagueness. Like, this
You
is
just
not
glaze
how.
over. Like when you're reading, you just glaze
Totally.
over.
And that is a strategy, right?
Yeah.
Where I've been a PR person and there are issues that come in, and sometimes I know if I am as descriptive
Mm.
and as boring as possible, a reporter is not going to use that in their quote,
Yeah.
is not going to use that in the story. And so sometimes that's exactly what I do. It's a tactic where you're
Mm.
hiding behind this kind of weasel language.
All right. Can I give, and I don't mean to try to put a positive spin in a way because it's going to impact a lot of people, but here's a
Sure.
couple of positive things I think could happen or you could learn from it. Number one, this is going to sound crass, but whatever. If the people going back 5 days a week to Amazon in their ginormous campuses, odds are other big companies are going to follow suit. So
Yep.
for people, I'm not saying you should do this or not. I'm not giving any financial advice, but I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. Most likely, you have these things called real estate investment trusts, or you have these ETFs that invest in real estate. So if I was a betting man, and I am a betting person, is that more people are going to start coming back to the offices. And, for the last few years, everybody's wringing their hands. Oh my God, what's going to happen with commercial real estate? Everything is going to go south. And then all the banks that, were, lending money for these real estate places, they're blowing up and so forth. On the positive side now, if they go back to the office, real estate prices should start kind of coming up again because people are coming back into it. The ecosystem around the big cities where they're based will start getting better because a lot of them, when there was remote or hybrid, they closed down. So now that
Right.
ecosystem could kind of maybe grow again. So you could get, if you invest maybe in these real estate trusts, and the reason I'm saying real estate trust, because unlike BlackRock that could just buy like thousands of houses all at once because they have the money, but for the average person, it's hard to do, but you could do it through
Right.
ETFs and other securities. And then you could buy, specific real estate. So that's one thing. And the other thing that Rick alluded to is that we've seen this pattern all the time. XYZ company lays off such and such people. Where does the stock price go? Up all the
Right.
time. So I haven't looked at Amazon, but I'd imagine even if it's not up now, it's going to be up moving forward. So that
And
might
what
be a
is
good buy.
crazy what's crazy about that second part is in the past, generally layoffs were a sign that a company was doing poorly,
Yes.
and it would lead to the share price going down.
Yes.
And company PR teams and investor relations team would kind of be embarrassed, and they would use these euphemisms like
Yeah.
reorganization, reduction in force, right sizing to explicitly avoid using the word layoff, because they didn't want their share price to get impacted. And now it seems like, hey, it's actually a positive signal. And, obviously, Jack and I, we're not investment advisors. We're not trying to tell you
Right.
what to buy. And we're not, cheering this on. Certainly not. But isn't that so insane in terms of where we are in the economic cycle
Dude, everything
where
becomes
everything's upside down?
topsy-turvy. The whole world is
Yeah.
topsy-turvy. It's crazy, right? All right, mass layoffs. Yeah, stock price goes up. What? What's going
I don't know
on?
what's going on. And
We
I
got to,
mean,
Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve. We got to degrade and make job losses so we don't have inflation. All right, well, like they're going to lose, people are going to lose their jobs and their
those
homes
are
and what
real
have you.
people.
These are real people
Right.
losing their jobs. But hey, we got to fight inflation. But the inflation came because the same very people said, "Oh, it's only transitory. Don't worry about inflation." And it's just crazy. It's
No,
it's
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 insane.
bizarro world.
But I mean, to the top of the hour of what we were discussing, Jack, right? I think it's really smart that you're kind of playing this chess in terms of thinking about, okay, well, this memo came out yesterday. What are actually the downstream effects, right? How is it
Mhm.
going to affect attrition? How is it going to affect these downtown cores, this foot traffic, the impact for other businesses, the impact on the real estate market? Amazon is so huge, right? They are in Seattle. They are probably the largest real estate
Mhm.
corporate tenant landlord in Seattle, right? Suburban Bellevue, which is right across the sound in Washington state. Obviously, Arlington, Virginia, right in the Washington, D.C. area where their HQ2 is. They also have folks in the San Francisco Bay Area. They have folks in Austin, Texas, Boston, I believe folks in Nashville, Tennessee as well. So these are all downtown cities, downtown cores where there are other businesses, right,
Yeah.
that are going to maybe benefit, right? The restaurants, the shops, whatever have you, but also other folks that are also in San Francisco and Austin and Boston and saying, well, now my labor market is going to be actually changed, right? Because now I don't have to force being remote to get that star candidate. Now I can say, well,
Mhm.
there are other choices, Amazon, and Amazon's going back to work too. So this could actually shake up what other companies do in terms of remote work schedules, in terms of like compensation packages, even, right? Where you have a flood of Amazon
Mhm.
managers that are coming out into the market. Maybe some of them are desperate, right? There are these folks out there that might want a lowball, and I'm certainly not endorsing it, but these are the kind of second
Mm.
downstream effects that this decision by Amazon is going to cause.
This is why it's good to have this so people can kind of understand, hey, it's multi-layered and you have to really think
Oh,
for yourself, how is this going to impact me or not? And I didn't mean to be rude by looking away. I just wanted to see the price of Amazon because I was curious. Now,
did it go
so
up?
it went up marginally, like 1.71, about 1%, which is not a lot. So maybe I don't have no idea what I'm talking about. So we'll see how that plays out. But so far, it didn't move the needle too much. So, but it's
I
still
mean,
early.
oh, it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
Because Amazon is what, a $2 trillion market cap
Yeah.
company? Versus that
Yeah.
2% is what, 20 billion?
That's true. Like every little bit, right? Like 1% off of that is a lot. That's a
Oh,
lot.
it's so insane, right? If you just think about how large Amazon is, right? And exactly, what we've been saying, I get very scared. I get very nervous about these decisions because, right, to your point, other folks are going to say, oh, actually, we can copy Amazon. Thank you, Andy Jassy. You gave me cover. Now I can start getting more strict with my performance review.
Yeah.
Now I can bring folks back 5 days a week. And, if folks say, hey, I don't like this, I'm going to quit, maybe some of these employers are going to say, great, that was, not a bug, but a feature of my decision. Like those were all kind of scary things to think about.
Yeah. What we could do is this, we could kind of keep an eye on it and then kind of come back and see, hey, what we were talking about, is that happening or not? Did we find other companies that laid off too? And so forth. So this way you can kind of maybe judge these patterns, because by knowing these patterns, it's helpful for people to know how to navigate their own careers and how to be careful and how to watch out to say, uh-oh, I've seen this before. I got to start getting my resume together, finding a recruiter, networking, and not be complacent, because this guy, we've seen this play out again and again. So be prepared.
Be prepared is
Yeah.
right. And I really appreciate that kind of reminder, Jack. Thanks for doing this episode.
Awesome. I would say it was good, but it's never good when it's these kind of challenges. But I think it's
Oh, these
helpful
terrible headlines.
to give some color and context, because you're right. Because with the press, they're just giving the blah 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 blah, and no one's like whatever. But I think we're delving into it. I'm not saying we have all the answers, but at least we're prodding people to say,
No,
wait, let's think this through and start really thinking, how is this going to impact me, and what do I need to do? And I think that's really what we're about with this podcast. Really, just trying to help people and give them advice and suggestions and guidance, and turning them on to new ideas to say, oh, all right, I got to figure out a way to better myself, even if I'm going to lose my job. And how can I do that? All
absolutely.
right, cool.
Spot on, Jack.
Excellent. All right. So we made the best of a unfortunate circumstance for a lot of people, but try to bring some positive to it. So thank you very much, Rick. This was awesome. Dude, you're like an expert in this space, bro. You're
No,
awesome.
not at all.
I love it. I love it.